I made a short post not too long ago on Substack, kind of talking about kind of my love of the Wing Chun knives and kind of the journey that goes there. It brings me back to being a kid, and there were kind of two pivotal moments where something in pop culture really kind of caught my eye and shaped how I kind of chased the dream. My friends and I would get together and we'd play superheroes and stuff, and I would sit down and I would draw and I would watch cartoons and all this kind of stuff. And I always liked the characters that were more kind of like rogues in Dungeons and Dragons. The kind of the lightweight, mobile kind of characters. I mean, I like Batman. I was never drawn to necessarily like the strongest characters or the fastest characters or anything like that. And when I got introduced to Dungeons and Dragons, I wanted kind of a lighter weight, more mobile character, not the guy with the biggest sword or anything like that. Well, so early on, and this was before I started training, I had seen the movie Perfect Weapon with Jeff Speakman. And by the end of the movie, they show like a little getting ready to go kick ass montage. And he's got a pair of sticks that he has this like custom harness. And he slides them on his back because Hollywood. And at that point, I was like, that's the coolest thing. It's kind of like, I don't even know if I knew at that point that was like what Daredevil did. I might have been thinking it's like using sticks, but like nunchucks or, like Michelangelo from the Ninja Turtles, whatever. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but I just remember being like mesmerized by the fact that he was just using a simple pair of sticks. And I just thought it was kind of the coolest thing. And it turns out that, years later, I would be in a Jeff Speakman lineage Kempo school. And we did, in fact, learn a little bit of stick work, a very, very minor amount. And it wasn't actually the Kempo sticks. So let's get to that for a second, right? What Jeff Speakman is doing at the end of The Perfect Weapon is, and he mentioned this in an interview with Sky Adkins, he said that it was like Kempo does its own stick things. It's not specifically Filipino martial arts. It's doing Kempo with sticks in your hands, and they just call it Kempo sticks. Well, when I started doing Kempo, I was never told that, but I was just insistent I was going to learn how to use the sticks. And at the first school I went to, it just never came up and I never had the opportunity. And then the second school I went to, we had a chance. But all we really learned was kind of the basic, heaven six pattern. And, and that was all well and good. But the fact is that, we didn't really spend much time stick fighting, weapons fighting, much at all, right? We got kind of little introductions to this and that here and there, but we were an empty hands school. It wasn't until many, many years later that I got introduced into, like much more serious Filipino martial arts, as like all of my, training partners and teachers, basically since that second Kempo school have had some Filipino martial arts experience, to the point where I am now partnered with a guy who inherited the family Filipino martial arts system that he practices. And the funny thing is that pretty much almost everybody doesn't use paired sticks. And there's a reason for that. Having the empty hand for disarms and close range work, grappling, and just generally striking and whatnot is actually extremely valuable. Having a second stick in your hand is more limiting than you might think. But I will mention this. I've noticed a trend in the Kempo world of a lot of people going and cross-training in Filipino martial arts. Now, some of that may be that Kempo sprung up in Hawaii and then kind of moved into California, and there are just massive, Filipino populations on the West Coast and in the islands, and you have a chance to do that. And then, of course, these people are just martial artists, and they go and seek out martial arts. And especially when you have somebody like Dan Inosanto, who was, very early on a Kempo guy and now is very much an FMA guy with over a dozen Filipino lineages under his belt. There's a strong connection between Kempo and Filipino martial arts, despite the fact that pretty much Kempo and Filipino martial arts don't have any like direct crossover in the schools, but you do see a lot of schools picking that up. Well, when I made my transition after Kempo into MMA and then into Wing Chun, well, coming into Wing Chun brought me into the knives. And that brings me to the other pop culture phenomenon, which came out, I think, a couple years later, which was the movie Wing Chun with Michelle Yeoh. And I don't think at that point I knew that Wing Chun was a style of Kung Fu. It's the story of Yim Wing Chun. It's basically her name. All I knew was by the end of the movie, she was fighting with a pair of short knives. It was really similar to the fighting with sticks that Jeff Speakman did. And so like in my brain, and this is something I'm already liking, this kind of, like small weapons, mobile characters, that kind of stuff. You get into the double sticks with Jeff Speakman, and then you get into the double knives with Michelle Yeoh, to the point whereas Power Rangers came out, I think, the same year or within a year of that movie. And I would draw myself as a Power Ranger, and these were my Power Ranger weapons. That's how in love with these things I was. And again, I didn't know they were tied to Wing Chun. Now there are other Southern Kung Fu styles that use them. But they're definitely a hallmark of Wing Chun. They're one of our primary weapons. And again, in the Wing Chun world, there's a massive tendency for people to cross over with Filipino martial arts. And again, I think some of that is the Dan Inosanto connection, the Bruce Lee connection, because you have this whole thing, right? Bruce Lee used the sticks in Enter the Dragon. Dan Inosanto again has the JKD thing, the Wing Chun thing. He's even trained with Sigun Kwok to some degree in more recent years. And then the fact is that we have the knives, they have the sticks, and there's just this kind of crossover. And the fact is that in the Wing Chun world and the traditional curriculum, most schools don't spend as much time on the weapons as they could or should. I think a lot of people look at them as historical artifacts and would just do the forms to keep up with it, but it's not practical for the real world. And maybe it's not practical for the real world, but I'm going to disagree with that. And the other side of it is, and I've made videos on this, training with weapons actually helps your empty hand fighting big time. So I still think it's a very important part of what we do. And so when we look at this, it's really cool, really interesting to see how many people will turn to Filipino martial arts on the back end of whatever their other style is. Now, Filipino martial arts are not the easiest thing in the world to find. It's very hard to find a full-time Filipino martial arts school. It's very hard to find a good teacher. You never know what you're gonna, find. I mean, and that's true with a lot of styles for sure. But it's just Filipino martial arts has not had the commercial success that other styles have. So it ends up being this thing that people tag on to the end of whatever they're doing, and then they just kind of roll from there. Now, for a lot of guys, going like the modern Arnis route kind of makes some sense, because you have like Remy Presses, who was actually a karate guy first, and then adopted Filipino martial arts on top of his karate base. Modern Arnis maybe kind of gels with karate fairly well because it comes from a guy who was synthesizing it on top of pre-existing karate skills. But then some people have their qualms with that, and they like another system, maybe Pikiti Tersha, maybe something else. There are so many lineages. So many of these are just family styles. And here's something to think about, right? I went the HEMA route eventually, rather than the FMA route. And, I guess I've just got to be different. But here's the thing. For a long time, if you wanted to learn like traditional weapons, and I don't mean like combative knife and firearms, I mean like traditional, non-gunpowder weapons, swords, sticks, spears, archery, things like that. generally speaking, you kind of had two options here in the States. You either went Japanese swordsmanship or you went Filipino martial arts, because those were kind of the things. Nobody really looks at Olympic fencing as a viable sword fighting skill, because it's really not. And there just aren't too many other traditions that people actively practice. I mean, nobody goes to just a Chinese martial arts kung fu weapons class. It very, very seldomly ever happens. They just go and learn kung fu, and they learn the weapons attached to the kung fu style. Kobudo never really took off, but that's inherent in some of the karate culture, but it didn't take off in the same way. But people very much respect the Japanese martial arts, and people interested in weapons are quite often interested in the Filipino martial arts. The thing is, the world is full of weapons martial arts, and I'm very, very thankful that HEMA brought about a resurgence of the European stuff, because that was something I was interested in as well. Growing up watching characters like Zorro and Robin Hood, that was just very much in my wheelhouse. Growing up on things like Conan and He-Man and Thundercats, I wanted to fight with swords and spears and stuff like that. And so I'm grateful that I got the opportunity to do that, time and place kind of thing. But bringing it back to the main point, is Kempo and Wing Chun have this strange overlap with Filipino martial arts, where like almost everybody involved in those two arts end up doing some Filipino martial arts. And like I said, I've cross-trained with a bunch of people. I've been to seminars. I know enough to be familiar, not enough to teach it. But that's the thing, right? There's this just weird crossover, like, well, this is what we do. And, well, why is it something that we do? Well, I've got two hands. Let me use two knives or two short swords, two daggers, whatever. Right? There's something kind of, I don't know, something about that kind of clicks with our circle of people. But anyway, it's just kind of one of those interesting things. And I bet you if you go and look up a Kempo school, and if you go and look up a Wing Chun school, if they're particularly serious about their training, and if they've been around for a while, I bet you you're going to find somebody that's also dabbled in the Filipino martial arts at least a little bit. All right, so this was just kind of a fun kind of popcorn story time kind of thing. I had written this article a while ago, and I was just thinking about it a little bit more. I definitely encourage you to go, learn some weapons on top of your empty hands, right? Learning how to box and kickbox and wrestle and do submission grappling is all well and good, and I definitely think that should be your primary. But I don't have any problem with you go and learning how to do like these traditional weapons, right? If you want to, like, if you are just in love with like samurai history, go learn Japanese swordsmanship. It's cool. Right. If you want to be a knight in shining armor, go join a HEMA club. If you want, if you really like, fast-paced like knife and short sword fighting, go do Filipino martial arts. There's so much cool stuff to be had out there, and it really, really does enhance your empty hands. But yeah, I'm just having some fun talking to you guys about this, because I'm just on a little bit of a nostalgia train. So I will talk to you guys later, and good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share this with your friends or anybody else who might be interested in this kind of content. If you happen to be in the Metro Phoenix area, come in for a class or just stop in to say hi. We'd love to meet you. Definitely check out our socials and our website that has all of our contact information and all of the other relevant information. And more than anything, check out our Substack. Our Substack will be containing all of the links that we use to cite and reference in our videos, as well as exclusive training content that will be available for premium members. Memberships are cheap, but you can also sign up for free, and we do have articles for free, and we will have more free articles available for you. It is a fantastic platform for what we're doing here, and we hope to see you over there. So I will talk to you guys later, and look out for the next one. Good journey.